Hi, I'm Abigail Rebollo, and this is my final action plan. I currently work at Northeastern University at the College of Science in the Office of Graduate Student Services. The Office of Graduate Student Services is composed of the director, advising manager, 2 academic advisors, the admissions manager, and 2 graduate coordinators. I am currently a graduate coordinator working under the admissions manager. Our office is an extension of the dean's office, along with the undergrad advising and co-op teams, the graduate co-op team, as well as the pre-med and pre-health advising team. And our office works closely with the Office of Global Services, Student Financial Services, the Registrar's Office, and Student Employment, Graduate Assistantships, and Fellowships Office. For the challenge identification, it is centered around John, aged 23. He is our office data analyst, tasked with building and running reports, data management, and ensuring compliance with the data that is used. Up until now, John has been showing signs of underperformance, and these signs are struggling with basics and mistakes on a daily basis. He at times seems disengaged from his work, and whenever he does make mistakes and he receives the feedback, he takes offense to it. Some of the contributing factors of his underperformance may be that this is his first job out of college. Additionally, this is a new position created in our office, and he was trained by multiple people, so his onboarding may not have been as consistent or foundational as it should have been. And also, he has had some inconsistent meetings with me. And overall, because of his underperformance, his coworkers have had to do some of his work before I see it, and office morale is low. And if he continues to do so and underperform, there's a risk of data being misused. So then that would start more work being exerted from his coworkers and myself. To try to improve his underperformance, I have devised 3 different strategies, and this is the first one, which is weekly review meetings. While some meetings have been held during the past year, they have been inconsistent and unproductive. So these proposed one-on-one meetings would help to improve communication between John and me, increase engagement in his work, and hold him accountable for any mistakes. And over time, the meetings would be planned around discussions of weekly expectations, progress of any ongoing tasks or projects, and clarify any disconnections about the scope of his role. And hopefully he would grow to be more comfortable in asking questions or addressing any concerns that he might have. Although these strengths may be something to look forward to, there are some weaknesses, and one of them could be time consumption. So there would be more work that would have to be produced to have these one-on-one meetings, prep time, as well as debrief time. And given John's history of taking offense to feedback, he might respond negatively to weekly review meetings, which would prevent any in-depth conversations on how to improve his performance. And if implemented successfully, this would cause an improvement in his problem solving. He'd become more independent in his work. And these review meetings could also be held with other employees who may be struggling in their roles as well. And an overall threat that could be at risk for these meetings is that it's the additional work and time to invest for these meetings. The second strategy is professional development training. It's important to remember that this is John's first job after college, and having 1 year of experience is a short time. Being out of college for a short time can sometimes have a blur in judgment on one's work, especially after being in an educational environment for several years. And though these trainings will allow John to build on the skills for his role, his intention of assigning them may not be understood. So for one of these weaknesses, he may take offense to being assigned professional development a year into his role, and it's possible that he could be opposed to training if he feels he's already gotten the professional experience from this role. However, if John does participate in professional development training, it would build on his current professional skills as well as allow him to acquire new ones and understanding the purpose of the feedback that he does get in his job, whether it's through one-on-one meetings or whether it's from other coworkers or myself. Another weakness that could happen to these professional development trainings is that it could take some time for the knowledge and any skills from professional development training to be applied to John's work. But if this strategy is successfully implemented, his confidence would grow in his work, he'd be more credible in his work, and professional development training could be used for other employees. One threat would be allocating extra resources, time, and finance into professional development training. And if John doesn't show any progress in professionalism, communication, or work ethic, it would just be a waste of resources. The third strategy is retraining and upscaling. Struggling with the basics of his work can indicate a lack of foundation in John's role and also a lack of confidence. So retraining and upskilling is another strategy that would help to improve his work performance. So retraining is training or teaching new skills and refreshing on skills that one already possesses. And upskilling is teaching new skills to improve on one's performance in their role without changing their role or their career path. So during retraining, John can enhance his skills as a data analyst, giving the opportunity to address his questions or concerns. And it can cause an increase in job satisfaction, and over time, he'll feel more value in his work and his role. And in upscaling, John would be keeping up with the latest information and skills that he needs in his role, and it would also help in producing more efficient data management and also decreasing the likelihood of turnover. A weakness would be a resistance to retraining. John may be unwilling or unable to be retrained in his role. Being that multiple people trained him in this newly created role, he may feel that his onboarding was normal or enough for him to fulfill his role. And even though 1 year of experience may seem short, he may resist changing the way that he does his work. If implemented successfully, retraining and upskilling will promote a culture of learning in the workspace, and it would also boost work satisfaction and office morale, because it can be implemented on other employees, and it can motivate employees to evaluate their own practices and lead to further improvements, like their workplace attitude, relationships with coworkers, and their mindset regarding their work and their work ethic. A threat that retraining and upskilling may pose is the significant time investment and the resource investment needed to retrain and upskill John, both on his part and my part. And if he does undergo retraining and upskilling and is successful, there is a chance he may leave his position if he feels that he's gained more than enough skills to move out of his role and into a new one. For strategy implementation, it was decided that weekly review meetings plus retraining and upskilling can be both implemented to improve John's work performance. Combining the two strategies will improve interpersonal communication skills, work ethic, and professionalism. The implementation would be occurring in 3 steps. The first is beginning weekly one-on-one meetings. Scheduled meetings are allowed for open discussion on any ongoing tasks, questions, or concerns that John may have, and his skill set, John's skill set and areas of improvement can be identified, which would also help to determine his retraining and upskilling. In these one-on-one meetings, we together will review his job description, and John will fill out a self-assessment evaluation form. This form is used normally for staff to prepare for performance review discussions at Northeastern, but it can also be used to record any accomplishments and address areas of improvement that John may already recognize. And from the self-assessment evaluation form, it would help to determine the retraining and upskilling John needs. So using the form, we will together determine priority areas and skills gaps in John's role. So any places he may be lacking from his job description or responsibilities, and anything that he or I may notice. So like the basics of the role, missing onboarding and training protocol, and any mistakes on daily reports that his coworkers or I may have seen. And in retraining and upskilling, John will develop at least 3 SMART goals to work toward for 3 months, as he's already been in his role for 1 year. 2 goals would be aimed for his role for professional reasons, and the third goal would be personal. A personal role could vary from professional development to enrolling in courses or applying for a degree certificate to help enhance his skills in his role. And the goals developed by John will also help determine any additional retraining, upskilling, and other resources he may need. And after determining the retraining and upskilling that he may need, John will participate in those sessions in between weekly meetings. I will review the materials that were used in his onboarding and training to ensure that they were updated to reflect his role and expectations. So I would just share the materials with John on a shared drive, and the rest of the office can have that as well if they want to create their own. And myself and one other colleague will train John and divide up the skills and retraining. Additionally, I will connect John to personnel similar to his role across campus to expand his network so he can bounce ideas off of them, understand how they do their jobs and how they might be able to do it effectively, and just be able to have more people in his support circle. Additionally, I would task John with stretch assignments, which have the purpose of learning on the job while proving an ability to take on new challenges. So taking on a new role in a project, or being able to work in a team setting. To evaluate the action plan's effectiveness, our weekly review meetings will go over John's self-reflection, goal progress, and feedback for him, and any feedback for me as his supervisor. While he is receiving answers to any of his questions or concerns, and getting any assistance in these meetings, John can let me know how he feels about his retraining and upskilling, and how I as a supervisor can support him, or if there's anything that I can do to improve our working relationship, or how I supervise him. So for every month of the 3-month timeline of his SMART goals, John will fill out the self-assessment evaluation form to reflect on his progress in his role, so he can see whether the skills gaps that we identified in our first meeting are closing, or they have closed already, how he feels about in his identified areas of improvement. But we can also acknowledge any accomplishments. So these meetings aren't just for looking at, here's what you need to improve on. It's looking at what he's been able to accomplish since the first meeting and how he's grown. And lastly, these weekly meetings will allow for me to check in with John to see how he was doing outside of work, and to see if he needs to be connected to any resources. But after the 3-month period timeline, and if little to no progress is made, human resources will be consulted. Over time, I anticipate that John will have an increase in engagement and confidence in his work as he completes retraining and upskilling. The weekly review meetings would be able to allow us to establish a good working relationship between me and John. And over time, he'll be able to be comfortable to provide me with feedback, and vice versa. Together, the meetings and the retraining and upskilling efforts will hopefully lead to more effective communication between me, John, as well as the rest of the colleagues in our office, and overall increase morale around the office. And as John executes his action plan, I hope to foresee an eagerness to learn, collaborate, and take on challenges until he's ready to move on to the next chapter of his career. For the takeaways and utilization of this plan, I personally learned that creating and executing an action plan for an underperforming employee is more additional work for a supervisor than I originally thought. This plan, of course, took a lot of thought and time to create, along like using the materials in the course and extra research. So I can see how in all of the strategies that I came up with for the plan, why it would take more additional time and how that could be a threat to implementing any strategy. And I also learned that this plan may not work for everyone. So I used one of the scenarios that Dr. Franjuto provided. That's how I use that, of course, to create this plan, and it would work hopefully for John. However, it may not work for me. It may not work for someone who works closely with John. It may not work for someone who is in the same role but in a different office. So it would have to have some edits or some complete changes depending upon the person and what they may be struggling with. And for myself, if I find myself struggling in my role or in a future role, I can use this plan or suggest it to my supervisor and we can work on it together. Or if I end up supervising someone or a few people in the future and I see some underperformance, I might be able to use this plan. But of course, going back onto how this plan may work for everyone, some changes would have to be made.